Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Life in Sport podcast, and I'm joined by a very special guest. And I'm just going to list his accolades because there's so many of them. Before I mention his name, he refereed 565 NRL games in total, 365 as the main referee, 200 as touch judge, 3 NRL grand finals, 4 state of origins, 12 international matches. I may have got that wrong. That was including a World Cup in 2017 and a 4 Nations, and also one of the only Super League games of the modern Super League that was played in Australia. His name is Matt. I'm probably going to butcher the way it said, Cecchin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. So let's get started. Your grassroots, from what I could divulge and could find out, your dad played reserve grade for Newtown. What was it like growing up around the Newtown Rugby League sort of scene?
I suppose by the time I could remember things, I don't remember ever meeting anyone within that scene. All I could remember was Dad rabbiting on about it all the time.
Yep.
And, you know, he made reserve grade, and you would have thought he would have represented the state and the country the way he used to go on about it. Very, very proud player. But back then, you know, he was given a choice by my grandfather. You either play rugby league or you raise your children and your family. There's no doing both because it wasn't professional. And
it wasn't a lucrative job at the time.
And if you got hurt, you couldn't support your family and that type of thing. So Dad opted on raising the family.
That's fair enough. And obviously rugby league was definitely a staple of your childhood, regardless of your dad playing or not, because he's a massive rugby league fan, etc. So what was that like growing up, and what team did you support growing up?
I went to Holy Cross College in Ryde, which was a pretty big rugby league school, and started refereeing with the Balmain District Rugby League side, and was a passionate Tiger supporter.
Balmain Tigers, okay.
Yep. So I remember as a kid sliding down the back of the hill now that's full of fig trees on a cardboard box, and you know, just loving that era. Talking about Elias Sirenen, Gary Jack, you know, Scotty Gale. Scotty Gale was my maths teacher in Holy Cross. Yeah. So that's where you know, it was a real passion. I still remember things like Panasonic Cup, you know, the midweek comp and all that type of thing. Wasn't the best rugby league player, played soccer.
I was going to say, did you play? I was going to ask, did you play rugby league?
No, I was, you normally had the 2 popular boys in the class as captains, and they'd pick their own sides, and I was always the kid left over. So, my PE teacher was Ronnie Palmer. Don't know if you know the name, but yeah.
I've heard of the name, wow.
Yeah, still a trainer. I'm not sure who he's with now, but I remember him throwing me the whistle and said, Chet, you didn't make either side, so you can referee it. And this is a 12-year-old boy, and did it and loved it. Then went and got my ticket the next week at Ryde Eastwood Leagues Club. That's where you went. I failed my rules test, but it didn't matter. I still got my referee's ticket.
That's fair.
Many would say I never really learned the rules, but
I don't know about
that. So that was as a 12-year-old, and become obsessed with it. You know, I took up
obsessed with the game or obsessed with refereeing.
Probably obsessed with refereeing to the point where I took up the local newspaper round so I could sell papers of a Sunday morning so I could practice my whistle.
Okay.
That's like, would stand in front of the telly and watch referees like Stone and Roberts and McCallum and, you know, drive the neighbours absolutely batty. And it wasn't a profession back then. All the refs,
no, that's true.
You know, had jobs. Most of them were school teachers or police officers. So.
Yep.
Very, very, very fortunate that as my career progressed, so did the actual profession itself.
Absolutely. And how did that progression go for you? Obviously, you start with districts and whatnot, and you refereed in the Ron Massey Cup or the Metro Cup back then. You know, how was the, you know, could say rise through the ranks for you?
It was a bit tricky for me because I refereed in Balmain until the age of 14. Mum and Dad split up, so my mum, my sister, and I moved to Perth. So I went from refereeing. Wow. Yeah, I went from refereeing under 14s to reserve grade in Perth.
And AFL dominated as well.
Yeah, that's right. But I was fortunate, again, I was lucky that the comp was really strong in Perth, because we're talking about the 2 years before the Western Reds were in the competition.
Yeah, okay, so there would have been a lot of build.
A lot of focus, a lot of coaching. An ex-first grade referee called Barry Barnes was sent over there full-time basically just to get the referees up to standard to improve the local comp there, because it goes hand in hand. If you've got a poor refereeing standard, it can often draw the competition down. So they focused that that had to get raised. And then 1994, I think it was, the Western Reds were in, and I was doing the reserve grade lines, and back then there was no video referee, so I'd be the first grade video in goal referee. So you'd run up and down in the in goal and make decisions. Well, I did a whole season, and I only had to make one decision. It was for a referee called Eddie Ward, and that was on a double movement. And so in the one decision I had to make all year, I got it wrong. So
okay. is that in hindsight? Isn't that you've gone and watched the footage back since, sort of thing?
Yeah, but it kind of the sport wasn't as
seriously taken over there. Maybe
it was part of the game. It was, you got on with it. The technology was just starting to come along, where we had freeze frames and things like that. So there wasn't a stack of expectation for perfection.
So like there is now, definitely.
Yeah, and it was a good lesson to learn. Actually, it was one that you can make mistakes and still be a good official. It's not, it's a component of what you do.
It's not the end of the world. Absolutely. And in 2001, you got your NRL refereeing debut, which was against not necessarily your beloved Tigers, because it was West's Tigers by this point. But you got your NRL debut refereeing against the Tigers versus Cowboys game. Can you talk us about that game and, the week leading up to it, sort of thing?
Yeah, it was towards the end of the competition. I'd had a very brief taste about 5 weeks before. I was a touch judge in New Zealand. The referee got injured at half time, and I got thrown into referee the second half of that game, and it went down to the wire. Sent a decision up to the video referee, and back then they had a green light, a red light, and a yellow light, and the video referee sent back a yellow light saying he couldn't tell. So I ended up awarding the try to the Warriors. And
so the yellow light back then was the equivalent of like stick with the referee's on-field call sort of thing?
No, because back then we didn't give a call. So all we did was, we're going up. Please review this possible try, and it was either red, green. There was no try or no try. There was no. So it was send it up, and they're having a look at a heap of replays, and there was just no vision of the ball. It was one of those held up ones, and comes back with yellow light. So I just thought, I'll lean on the rule book here, and it says benefit for the doubt goes to try scoring side. So I did that, and
yeah, nice. And then obviously, that later in that season, you got your debut against for the Tigers versus the Cowboys. What was that like?
It was incredible. It was a night game. There was only about 2,000 people there because it was bucketing down with rain.
Baptism of fire.
It was what they used to call ladies' round back then. So I come out to It's Raining Men, and I then was horrified, thinking, oh God, here I was thinking that no one knew about me being gay.
Oh wow, okay.
It's Raining Men. So I did the game, and it was amazing. I've always been very big on celebrating achievements, even as a ref. So
one game is one game that more than I've refed in the NRL, sort of thing. It's a definitely big achievement.
And especially from a lifelong dream perspective. I remember booking a room at one of the local pubs in Rozelle afterwards, and a heap of family and friends that had supported me along the way back then. We had a big night afterwards and enjoyed it. However, the next week I called a meeting with the head of referees and said, look, I've got something to tell you. I've kept it totally confidential because I didn't want to be discriminated against, nor did I want to be the token
gay referee sort of thing.
But I'm gay. So he was totally fine with it.
I was going to say back in 01, that would have been, it's such a touchy subject nowadays in rugby league, let alone back then. So it was received well with that board.
Well, it was received well with that board. To their credit, I wanted it kept quiet for no other reason, is that I had a son who was in high school.
Okay, yeah.
He knew that I was gay. He was totally fine with it. I just wasn't sure how it'd be received by them. So I wanted to always be mindful of the impact on him, and things like that. So it was pretty much kept. When I say
very well under wraps.
Yeah, look, if I fast forward then to 2012, when I did come out. By then, all the referee squad knew.
The people who needed to know knew by that point.
Basically. Yeah. But it was important for me to, I suppose, share my story because, Ian Roberts' book was very important to me.
Absolutely.
Because I honestly didn't associate with being gay because I had no exposure to gay people. I thought to be gay, you had to be, and this is very naive of me, but you had to be flamboyant or girly and I didn't
not a macho rugby league loving bloke.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't go that far.
Sorry.
and yeah, just reading that book that, gave me a tremendous amount of, I suppose, belonging of where I fit. So when I could take the opportunity, my son had left school by then. I did it that very next year, and it was really, really well received. Front and back page of the paper for maybe 2 days, and then that was it. I had 2 comments on the field by players after that. Both of them were positive.
I was going to say, geez, don't tell me they were negative.
No. But it's funny. I never got that, but that's was probably my biggest fear in thinking, how am I going to handle that? Because I've got a microphone, and thankfully, touch wood. And a credit to the game, I never even felt close to being in that situation.
That's amazing.
Did players say things that they shouldn't have to me? Yes, but it was always around me making a stuff up or a decision that they didn't agree with.
Yes,
and I think that's what surprised me the most about the Manly players last year.
I was going to say, I'd love to bring that up, and that just made me think of the Manly players thing this year. There's probably other players, not just Manly, in other teams that may be, citing religious reasons and whatnot. So, what were your thoughts, and how did it impact you personally?
Just shock, because I'd refereed some of these players. I had, you can tell there have been players along the way that there's a personality clash, or there's something that you just don't click with them. So that's life with everything. But with these people, never had an issue with me. I never had an issue with them. Would shake their hand. That was, and that's why I was, I went on
a bit.
Oh, extremely. And that's why if I ever get the opportunity, if I'm ever back involved with the game, I'd value nothing more than sitting down with some of those players in a private room just to have a discussion. And it's not about telling them anything. It's about listening. It's about understanding, because it's, I don't understand everything about being gay, and nor do they understand, I suppose, everything about their religion. But through both of us having sort of improved knowledge of what each other's going through, I can only think it would help. I think it's really wrong of people to put labels on them or put them down for different things. But, like I said, I just value the opportunity to talk to them, just to give them a greater understanding on, what impact their actions have on people around them.
Absolutely.
Whether we like it or not, first grade rugby league players or anyone involved in the sport are role models.
Absolutely.
People really do put them on a pedestal. Should they, shouldn't they, is a debate for another day.
Yeah.
But it happens. I remember having a conversation with my son once about drugs, where there was a rugby league player that was, found to abuse them. And, the comment to me from my young son at the time was, Dad, they can't be that bad for you because, we've got one of our great rugby league players that have, and I went, wow, they do have an impact on, and they shape the way society thinks and feels. So yeah, it's it shock and surprise was the thing. There was certainly no hatred. There was certainly no dislike. I just felt for everyone involved.
No, that's fair enough. It's a very interesting insight from that. And random topic, I know that's just come out of it, but what team does your son follow?
Newcastle Knights.
Okay, that wasn't me basing it off to find out which player it was. I was just trying to figure out, which, because you're about main Tigers fan, from days ago, and he's a Knights fan. Do we know, why does he follow the Knights? Do you know?
No idea. No, knowing him probably because he liked the colour combo. So he's always been a Knights supporter. So
that's fair enough. And who was your biggest influence during your junior refereeing time or career, you could say?
Different people at different stages. There was a chap called Phil McMahon, who was the director of referees in the Balmain district back in 1986. And believe it or not, he's still heavily involved with coaching and referees in Balmain. He's one of these people that have never been paid for what they do, and get up every Sunday morning and then spend all week doing appointments and changing them when people can't turn up and dealing with forfeits and bad weather and all that type of thing. And, angry 13-year-old young referees when they missed out on the under-8s grand final in 1987 when they thought they should have. You know what I mean? And then probably after that, Barry Barnes, who was an ex-first grade referee who was sent to Perth.
Right over in WA, yep.
Yeah, so that was like 2 years of one-on-one video analysis, getting games over there in the first grade comp and being put in the hot water early to be tested. And then, I suppose Bill Harrigan, was someone I admired so much as a referee, and then to compete with him for a tiny bit. And then, he was the first refs coach to give me my first grand final in 2011.
And what was that like? Yeah, the 2011 grand final was the first one you refereed. And yeah, how was it for you that whole week? Yeah,
it's funny. I didn't know it then, but I know it now. The grand final itself was okay, but it was the semi-final series beforehand. You just get amazing games of football because when you go to a semi-final, any of those games, you got the crowds supporting either side. It's just the intensity is fantastic. You go to a grand final and it's more about the event, and a big chunk of the crowd aren't there to follow either side. They're there for the event itself. Yeah. So it can kind of detract a little bit. So I've done 3 grand finals in the middle, one on the line. The one on the line, the Tigers Cowboys one in 2005 was amazing because that was a great game of footy.
That gives me goosebumps. That grand final goes down as one of the best.
And then the other good one I did in the middle, which was the Sharks Storm grand final, in 16, and that
it went down to the literal final siren.
Oh, it did. I remember I actually went into the in-goal just expecting Melbourne Storm to score.
Oh wow!
I did. I just thought you could just see it coming. They've done it a heap of times before.
Yep.
And when it didn't happen, the siren went. I looked at Benny Cummins, and he looked at me, gave me that typical Ben Cummins look, I suppose, and we call full time. And it was a great game as well.
That's amazing. And obviously, you've had a lot of opportunities from rugby league, such as World Cups. Being able to referee that, being able to referee a Super League game. How did the standard of the Super League game differ to the NRL?
Look, for me, it was just different. It wasn't better or worse. You often get, comments about, referees here are much better than the ones in the UK, or the standard of football is better or worse. It's just different. It's a different footy. And I think you can draw, me, this year I've probably only watched 3 or 4 games. One of them was the women's State of Origin match.
Yep.
Fantastic. Yep. I probably enjoyed it as a sporting spectacle better than the grand final and better than, I think it was Origin 2.
Yep.
There was just something about the simplicity of the football that still had the passion that we, it was fantastic.
It was simple footy, but effective. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Less tactical stuff, less.
Honestly, just run it through the middle, try and crash through them, and if you can't, take it out wide.
Yep, and that's why I enjoyed doing a lot of the test matches I did, which were PNG and Samoa, or Tonga and Samoa, because it was just brutal, basic footy, and it was incredibly skillful, but lacked a lot of that technical aspect that you get now with with either the wrestle or the holding them up and dancing and all that technical stuff that's come into our game through really, really clever coaches and stuff like that. So
absolutely. And speaking of coaches and players on the field, who was the toughest player individually, if you can remember, to referee? Because I've interviewed a few former refs. Gavin Badger in particular said Michael Ennis was the smartest player he's ever refereed. So you could say smartest, or you could say most annoying, whatever you want to say. Who was the toughest player to referee?
A few tricky players. The Walker brothers were tricky when they were playing.
Yep.
The Morris brothers sucked me in once, but they started to have a bluer, and I ran over there, whistle in my mouth, thinking I was going to, and then I got there and they were winking at each other.
Yep.
I referee people like Gordon Tallis. He was captain of Brisbane one game, and I sin bin Alfie Langer. And I sin binned him, and Gordon comes up and says, "Cech, can I ask what the sin bin was for?" And I said, "Yeah, he called me an expletive Dumbo."
Yep.
He goes, "Oh, I know what Dumbo means, but what's expletive?" You know what I mean? That's the type of guy he was. He was
gotcha.
He was always, "Cech, I need to have a word," and he'd slow the game down. And back then we had to call time out when the captain wanted to talk to you. And I said, "Yes, mate, what can I do for you?" He goes, "Look, how old are you?" I said, "Oh, this is on telly. You can't."
Yeah.
I said, 28, 29. He goes, "I've noticed you going grey. If you speak to Harrigan, not only does he perm his hair, because remember Bill Harrigan used to have the long hair back then. He said, I think he colours it as well." And this is all on TV. And commentators are loving it. I'm feeling like an idiot going, "Oh my God, what am I going to do now? How do I start this game?"
Yep.
And you just, with people like Gordon, you just have a wink and a nod to him, and he's happy. You start waving your finger at him and trying to lay the law down. He wins every time. So, so yeah.
No, that's fair. So Gordon Tallis would be the trickiest, you would say?
Yeah, but probably got on with Gordon as well, if not better than most referees. We definitely know how he went with Bill. And you know what? I think now, and even back then, they were quite close friends.
Oh, they have such a big respect for each other. Yeah. I've had the honor of interviewing Bill himself, and he also mentioned that they are very well respected, as in him and like between each other.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
Look, and I think, and there's absolutely no excuse for what Gordon called him. But if you saw the two stuff ups that Bill made just before that, you can understand why.
You can understand why a player would be getting a bit, "How you going?" Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. No. Absolutely. And at what point did you decide to try and make it as like a top grade referee? Because as you said, you got your paper route and whatnot, but at what point were you like, right, I can really, make something of myself with this?
I think it was just before the war, the Super League ARL war.
Yep.
There was the money from referees went from, a $5,000 a year type sign-on fee and a match payment. And if you got dropped or injured, you never got your match payment, to, okay, Super League will pluck the top 5 referees and we'll give them a very, very good wage. And, you'll basically train a couple of days a week and you'll spend 2 days with your family and then you'll travel with footy.
Yep.
It really was the start of professional refereeing. And as someone just outside of it, I was involved, but on the sidelines and, a couple of ranks down. I thought, I want to have a crack at this. So I did the local grand final in Perth in 1993 or 94, I think it was. And I had Steve Clark come over and watch me from Super League. However, it wasn't my best game. I didn't referee well at all. And Clarkie comes down and says, "Mate, we're full." So I then, because I was already contracted to the RL, I packed up the next year and moved to Sydney. And then I went into Metro Cup, and that's where I stayed for 5 years.
Slugging away in Metro Cup at what point during the Metro Cup time did sort of the opportunities start, lingering of you might get an NRL gig sort of thing?
The longer I stayed there, the less I thought I'd ever get it.
Oh, wow.
So there was the referees internally had a lot of yuck sort of blood between those that went to Super League and then those that went to ARL. And I think the referees took longer internally to get over it than what the rest of the game did. So the refs coach at the time was basically trying to make a lot of changes within refereeing, and he took me from reserve grade Metro Cup to first grade in a week.
Wow.
So I didn't go reserve grade, first grade, under 21s, reserve grade. He just said, "No, I'm and he grabbed several other referees and did that with. One of them was Shane Hayne as well. He had a massive career afterwards. So it's I was given opportunities. I made plenty of stuff ups, but I also tried to make the most of them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And a lot of those opportunities, as you said, and we mentioned grand finals, World Cups, and that brings me to the topic of the recent World Cup that just happened. Did you watch much of it? And what are your thoughts on the officiating of it and in general, the whole, you could say, spectacle of it?
Look, personally, it's the only time this year where I got a little feeling in my gut going, oh, I wish I was doing it.
Oh, really?
So, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, because you know how people now take photos of their boarding passes and passports when they're in lounges of airports and they're about to take off. A few of the refs did that, and I just went, oh, I'd love to be doing that, because some of the best memories I've ever had on and off the field have been in, overseas doing tournaments. Four Nations in 2011 was fantastic. It was 6 weeks in the north of England. It was just brilliant.
Wow.
I had the pleasure of refereeing. I was the first I was just an Australian referee, basically. I refereed Australia and England in the final. Now it was the first time they'd done that in years. They normally always used to use a neutral ref.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that brings up, sorry to interrupt, but that was a very big hot topic for Ashley Klein being the referee for the final this year. Can you explain that ruling change, for lack of a better term, as to why it's no longer that you no longer need a neutral nation referee?
Well, having that in implies that the referee's not neutral. Every referee needs to be neutral.
Absolutely.
And, mate, I was a Tiger supporter. I really was.
Yeah.
You ask any Tiger supporter if they thought I stuffed up or got decisions right any more or less than Gavin Badger or Ashley Klein or anyone else, and they'll say, oh, he's just as bad as everyone else. You know what I mean? So, and that's why I think as a referees panel, we fought very hard to say the best referee should referee the best two sides. Whoever the governing body is or whoever the person is in control of the referee, they shouldn't have to go and pick their third or fourth best official to put them into the pinnacle of our sport.
Yeah, you should have the best refereeing the best. Yes.
Yeah, you should. I was fortunate in that tournament that I was selected to do that. And, to referee Lockyer's last game in Australia and also England was a privilege that, I still think of, because he was one of those very few players that you just admired everything about him.
What was he like to control or, referee on the field? Because he's an idol of mine growing up being a Broncos and a Queensland fan.
He was just very smart, very fair, very balanced. When he ran past you or you ran past him and says, Chet, you got that wrong, you knew that you'd 100% got that wrong. He wasn't playing my games with you. He wasn't trying to, and if he ran past you and says, Chet, check that, I would, because I respected, like he'd never...
He didn't try and get the way of the Broncos win. It was okay.
No, that's he was always respectful in how he did it. He, I suppose respect was just incredible. Cameron Smith, mate, I know a lot of people take the mickey out of him for the time that he gave referees, or the referees gave him time, but he was just very clever in how he did it. He wouldn't come up effing this and you're effing kidding and we're not getting a fair go. He'd go, Chet, mate, I agree with that penalty you just gave against us. I'll go and have a chat to him. But, mate, keep an eye on number 6, because he gets into tackles and his right arm gets caught all the time, and we think he's trying to slow it down, but just keep an eye on it for me. So my head's going, number 6, oh, yeah. Oh, you know what? He's right. And what you felt like doing was, look, let's go and order a couple of copies, and can you explain more about what you're seeing, because I'm just not doing it. So he was always really respectful when he did it. I had a stack of respect for him as a player as well.
That's awesome. And obviously the World Cup, Australia beat Samoa in the World Cup final. Did you end up watching that game?
No, I didn't. I didn't watch it. Time difference and coverage has been pretty sketchy with us on the roads. And we've been in a caravan for the last sort of 10 months. And
I was going to say, how's the retirement transition going? Talk to us about the retirement and all that.
Yeah, really good. I won't get up and show you from the chest down, because there's a bit more there than what there was to start with. No, mate, I've loved it. We tried something new. We were coming back actually from a game in Canberra a couple of years ago and passed a caravan, and I just said out loud to my partner, wouldn't that be fun? And he goes, well, what stops us from doing it? We know we don't want to live in Sydney forever. Why don't we get a caravan and check out the rest of Australia and
then settle somewhere?
Live next. And we'd never towed anything in our life before. And then And then we took off on the 10th of January this year. We've done nearly 50,000 Ks.
Where's been your favorite top 5 places that you visited so far?
Oh, mate, I loved up around Foster, either side of Foster. You've got Redhead or Blackhead. You've got Diamond Beach, Bluey's Beach, around that area is nice. You go further up, around Coffs Harbour's nice, Safety Bay, Diamond Beach, Crescent Head, There's
That's a
just so
lovely
many,
spot, Crescent Head.
some inland places. Mullumbimby's really nice.
Yep.
It's just look, I think we'll live in the eastern seaboard because it's just a lot easier and there's so many things that are close to it. Inland from Byron's really nice. It's just, the problem we have for someone that used to make decisions for a living.
It's hard to make a decision.
It's like we'll walk into a house going, yeah, this will do. And we've walked into about 20 homes like that. So, we're really fortunate. My son gets married at the end of this year.
Oh, awesome.
So we'll go to Adelaide for that. And then we'll head back across and do some. Are
you going to go down with the caravan down to Adelaide or?
Yeah, we are. We're here for another week at the in-laws' place, and my partner's doing a show here, and then we'll head off and do the Eyre Peninsula, and then do Adelaide, and then come back across.
Wow, definitely been a full-on retirement, but hopefully a relaxing retirement.
It's a cleansing one. Like a lot of people have said, did you watch footy last night? And you chat to a lot of people in caravan parks and campsites about, did you watch last night's game? And I think they're genuinely surprised. I went no, and there's no. It's not because I was bitter and twisted. I just needed a break, and sure enough, the limited
been your life for the last 20 plus years, you definitely would need a break.
Oh, look you talk to airline pilots, and all those guys had a real passion for flying. And that passion changed into a job. And when it changes into a job, when you're doing it day in and day out, you can lose some of that respect for it. And I think I couldn't have left at a better time. I was still fairly well respected. I wasn't getting the top games anymore. And I knew that, there was probably only one direction for me to go. And it was important that if I left the game a season or two too early and it meant leaving the game in high regard, then I was happy with that.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to hang on for too long because I was desperate of wanting to hold on to it.
Leaving on your terms sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And because of that, I think, if I ever wanted to come back into the game in some way, shape or form, I think, I spoke to Andrew Abdo at a conference a little while ago, about 3 weeks ago. He goes, Cech, where have you bought? Where are you staying? What are you going to do with this? And I said, I haven't decided yet, mate, but when I do, I'll definitely let you know. So yeah.
No, that's awesome to hear. I've got a few final questions and quick fire questions to round it out, but I have one more question before that. And it was obviously you've refereed during when there was one referee and then when there was two and then back to one referee again. First of all, what was the switches and changes like with that? And who did you love refereeing in the middle with?
Okay, good. The second part of the question I haven't had before. The changes were quite incredible. So I was dead against it before it come in.
As in renewing the one ref?
No, we're going to two refs.
Oh, okay.
I thought there's no way that we're all too different. There's no way we're going to, have the same feel for the game and things like that. But, it's just when it come in and what it gave me the opportunity to do was either hide for a little bit if I'm not having a good game.
Yep.
So if I'm making a dusty call, I can go, okay, I'm going to go into the pocket. You're going to referee the game for a bit. I'm still here if you need me, but let me get my head on and then I'll come back in. Or if I'm refereeing with you and you're a junior burger and you haven't refereed before, and if the game's 18-all, you're just staying in the pocket.
Yeah.
But if it's 40-0, there's the whistle. I'm going to go in the pocket and go to town. And if you make 3 or 4 bad mistakes, it doesn't matter because it's 40-0 and no one's going to care.
Yeah.
So there was that flexibility with officiating that was great. And the other good thing about it is, mate, we don't see 30% of the play. And when you've got so many players in tackles now, probably more than you ever have, you're making a lot of guesses. And the accuracy just isn't there the way it was. Now, when we had two refs, I don't think we did it smartly. I don't think that second referee should have been in there over the ruck trying to speed it up or barking at players. I think they should have stood back and just helped with the vision.
Yeah.
And they also should have gone to players that were getting upset or getting frustrated and gone to them, look, Chris, mate, I've noticed you're doing this, this and this. If you try this, or just be careful because, if you get another warning, you might end up in the bin.
Yep.
It's off camera.
It's discreet.
It's discreet, and there was that element that was really, really lost, I think, when two referees went. So the things I hated about it, mate, was I was constantly given a lot of information.
Yeah.
And when you're getting that feedback from 3 people on the field, other people on the field, and a video referee and a match day coach, it was really easy to lose your sense of feel in a game.
Yep.
That's what I loved about going back to one ref. I could feel what was happening again. You know what I mean? There was a little less noise in the head, and my accuracy wasn't as good, but the players were okay with that. Yeah. And if I think about the big stuff ups I've made in my career, and there's been some clangers, like 7 tackles against North Queensland in a semi-final.
Wow.
Cronulla won by 2 points in that game, and North Queensland got kicked out. And the year before, they got dudded by the hand of God, the video referee. So it was just yuck. And I remember going to Neil Henry the next year before a game and said, mate, I want to apologise. And he just stopped and he said, don't you dare apologise. He said, mate, you're no different to players. Jonathan Thurston dropped the ball twice in that second half. He hasn't apologised to me. He didn't mean to. It's just part of what we all do. And if I look back at my career, the people that have taken my stuff ups the best are other players and coaches.
Yeah.
It's everyone else outside of the game that just doesn't understand. How can this guy not count to 6? It's got to be dead easy.
It is, but it's not.
It's not.
Like,
it's not.
I referee very basic Oz tag, and I still catch myself trying to feel like, oh wait, what tag is it?
Yeah,
is it tag for? Like, it's so easy to forget.
Cricket umpires are standing out there. They're not running around. They've got little machines in their hand, and there's 2 of them, and they still get it wrong.
Exactly. People are like, oh, that 7 tackle set, or how can you not count to 6? There is so much going on the field, let alone. Yeah, it's so crazy to think about it. And just before we go into the quick fire questions, want to touch on the fans and whatnot. As we spoke just before we started recording, social media wasn't a thing when you started as a referee, but it was definitely a thing when you finished as a referee. What was it like riding that social media wave of when it started up? And then, because as you said, you'd maybe get 2 articles a year if you were a good or bad ref, to constant inboxes from, on Instagram or Twitter or wherever.
Yeah, and it was probably the biggest change I saw from an officiating perspective. When I first started, there were 1 or 2 articles a year from either mistakes, or once I had a coach knock on the door saying, Cech, I thought you refereed well. However, this is our 4th loss in a row. And there's a bit of pressure from the board on my job and a few of our players, so I'm going to blame you in the press conference. And he shuts the door. And I looked at the other refs and I went, have you seen that before? They went, no. Anyway, this coach went to town on me in the press conference.
At least he didn't. At least he came to you first, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, mate, and it was a really good lesson to learn because, and of course, I was the worst referee in the world for 3 or 4 days, and we got dudded, and there was this decision and that decision, and there was no pressure on that team for that week, and that's what that they needed. So I always understood and never took it personally when it did come from players or coaches. And mate, to be honest with you, when I had games where players would blow up and they'd say some yucky things, every time after a game, and I was the first referee to start doing this, I'd go and shake the captain's hand after a game because it never used to happen. And it was important for me to go either thanks for the game or sorry for the stuff up or mate, I did my best. Every time my hand was always shaken. So, and then you fast forward 20 odd years to now where you've got social media and you've got hundreds and hundreds of yuck comments.
Yeah.
And you, doesn't matter who you are, and you've got the belief that these people, have never played and it means nothing. But the reality is you're still thinking about some of those comments
to this day.
Sometimes days later, so they do have an impact.
And speaking of the impact, you did mention you came out, not as in came out, but I mean you came out about panic attacks, like after games and whatnot. How was that? Obviously, was that partly due to the messages maybe that you were receiving, as in after a game or whatever?
Possibly, I think it was also had a lot to do with my head was full. I'd been doing it for a long time. I went from being able to referee and didn't matter how I went to sleeping well at night. Towards the end of my career, I'd be up at 3 a.m. thinking about a decision that wasn't wrong, but players didn't like and caused uncomfort and I'm just thinking, and thankfully now we have sports psychs as part of our day-to-day coaching. And I think it's only going to grow, especially with social media. When we do a calf or a hammy, we go to a physio and we get it treated. Unfortunately, with mental health, we tend to not put up a hand. We tend to think I'm soft if I've got something wrong with me, or they're going to think I can't referee if I'm, if I'm,
or I'll be right by next match day, sort of.
Yeah, that's right. Let's suppress it all, and guys are generally very good at doing that. But and I think what is really important is your other squad members, your other referees. There's a great current group of NRL referees, guys and girls, that are just highly gifted and highly supportive of each other. We all want the big dance at the end of the year, but we all know that it takes everyone's, it's bizarre. We're competing with each other, but we're also one big team.
That's it, yeah.
So we want everyone to go well, because our worst referee is the one that gets talked about, and that paints a picture for all referees, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And as far as controversy is concerned, the game's not too fussed when it's about referees, because it sells newspapers. People love to talk about it, and no one's getting hurt, and it's it doesn't stop kids from playing. So when it's about a ref stuffing up, the game will do what it can to make referees as good as possible, but they're also, it's okay. It's part of the fabric of what we do. But
that's when, as you were mentioning, it's so important now that there's sports psyches to be able to help with that, because it may just be a newspaper article or an online article that maybe, saying, oh, Cech missed 2 tackles or 2 calls last night, sort of thing. But like you said, it could be the difference between your whole week, the following week, being good or bad for you mentally.
More importantly, it could also be your partner at home that takes that, or that your kid that goes to school and gets bullied for that. There's a whole, when I have had
death domino effect.
Yeah, I was okay with them, because it's not part of the gig and no one should ever get it, but you understood the environment that you were getting into.
Yeah.
But for people like your partner or your kids or your mum or your sister that also get death threats because of it,
that's not on.
That's when you start to feel responsible for putting them into that situation. So there's that other sort of yucky element of it. That's one good thing about the game. They've been serious, and I only hope that things like sports psychs become more and more involved, because it can only make everyone stronger.
Oh, absolutely. And let's go with the last or final, quick fire questions, followed off by 2 last questions. First one is, how do you like your steak?
Medium rare.
Very nice. Apple or Android?
Apple.
Very nice. If you could have any superpower, what would it be and why?
Flying, because you could go anywhere.
Is that why your name is Matt Flies on
Instagram? And not only that, most of those superheroes have their undies on the outside, which is kind of a good look as well. So
Yep.
No, I've actually got my pilot's license, Merv.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, and so very, very like junior related, but love flying. So
that's really cool. And because I've always wondered why your Instagram handle or username was Matt Flies. Yeah. That's awesome. What's your beer or drink of choice?
Stone and Wood.
Very nice. Any particular one, like pale ale or whatever?
The Pacific Ale. I can't afford it now that I'm a grey nomad. So it's whatever's going the cheapest. But it's very nice.
Yes, it is very nice. I like Stone and Wood, but also like Bolter is my favorite go-to.
Yeah,
it's
like the mid-strength one.
Yes, the Captain Sensible.
Nice.
Yes,
yeah.
They're good. Like, I actually, believe it or not, just had a tour of the Bolter Brewery this past weekend. The partner got it for me for my birthday a week ago. So we did it on Saturday, and it was amazing. I've been drinking it for 6 years, so basically since it was released, really. And favorite beer, but if I can't have that, then I'll have a Stone and Wood.
I've got another one to try is Green Beacon.
Green Beacon, okay.
Yeah, Brisbane-based brewing. Try that if you can get it on tap. I think you'll really like it.
Oh, absolutely. I'll give that a go for sure. What's your favorite movie of all time?
Finding Nemo.
Oh, okay. Why? That's such an interesting answer, because so many people are like, "Oh, got to go the old, Shawshank Redemption, that sort of stuff." Finding Nemo. That's awesome.
Well,
why?
I can't say Sound of Music on a podcast like this. No, I'm joking.
You could. You really could.
Mate, I think I like it because there's a strong father-son element. It's about adventure. It's about friends. It's, I love nothing more than, looking after the grandkids and throwing on an animated flick, because the stories behind the stories are often fantastic.
Oh, I love that. I love that aspect that Disney and DreamWorks do. So absolutely agree.
Yeah.
And so we've got the final two questions. First of all, looking back on your career, what is your proudest achievement?
Mate, I think it's something as simple as, being the first ref to shake both captains' hands after a game of footy. It's something subtle like that. It's something now is encouraged. I remember Todd Greenberg noticed that I did it, and he said, I want all the refs to do it. I'm really proud of that. I know it sounds silly. And
you're a trendsetter, you could say.
Well, it's not about a grand final or a state of origin, and there've been some fantastic ones of those. But it's that, I suppose it's that bridging the gap of understanding between officials and players that, we do our best. We're human. We're sorry. We're real, that type of thing.
Exactly. And it shows, in my opinion, like from a fan's point of view, a little 10-year-old kid that's at the footy living and breathing and dying their team's colours, and say their team gets smacked like 40-0 or something, that the referee is shaking the hand of his favourite team or probably his favourite player, the captain's hand at the end of the game.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
I think that's amazing. And last question I have is, what advice do you have for any youngsters or anyone who aspires to be a professional rugby league or sports referee?
Not just to focus on that, make sure that if all you have in your world is refereeing, every time you have a bad game, your whole world sort of turns to yuck. Make sure you have a strong family network, group of friends, other hobbies, other things you've got going at the same time. If I look back of officials that I've seen coming through that had probably far more potential than me, a lot of them got burned out because of that. Their attention to detail and their aptitude was fantastic, but all it was footy. Yep. So when, stuff happens and you can't control some of the mistakes you make, they didn't cope very well. I've always had a strong mix of other things that I've had interest in throughout my whole career, and it helped me being distracted basically for when I did have those games that I may not have done as well as I should have been, instead of
fair.
Sitting at home on the couch on a Tuesday with nothing to do. I'd be, in at my company working and looking at spreadsheets and, talking to people about their jobs and things, real things that really matter to those people, which, was a good distraction.
That's awesome, because I was literally just about to ask what your distraction was for that, because for some players it's golf or it's, gaming or whatever. So for you, it was you put yourself into work, but in a different aspect.
Yeah, mate, look, I remember doing, before a State of Origin game in 2017 in Brisbane, I had to do a tender that was due that day for the company I worked with. So I spent the whole day in the hotel punching this tender out for Sydney Water.
Wow.
Pressed send, had a shave, had a shower, hopped in, did the game. It was a fantastic game at Lang Park. I forget who won, but I only blew like 3 or 4 penalties in the whole game.
That's amazing.
And I remember a journo coming up to me and says, Chetch, great job, well done. What was your match preparation like? And I actually had to lie because I thought if they knew what I'd done. But I actually think in reflection, it was that distraction that it enabled me to referee that game really well. If I would have done what I normally did, I would have laid there in my hotel room all day, imagining all the consequences that could have happened in that game.
Yep. Played the game 10,000 times over in your head. Yep.
Yeah. So I would have gone out there, I think. And that's one thing I never did often. And we had times where, this team sort of does this player's renowned for doing this. Often you'd go out there and it wouldn't go to plan. So you'd have a level of expectation. So, for the second half of my career, I thought anything could happen here.
Yeah.
And I think you're better for it because of it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. First of all, I want to thank you very much, or last of all, you could say, I want to thank you very much for joining me on the podcast for a chat. It's been amazing to have you on the podcast. I know that when I made the post on Instagram, there's actually, I'm sure you know about it, there's a dedicated Instagram page for you. It's literally Matt Cecchin fans or fan base. And they shared the post and all that. So big shout out to them. I'm sure that the owner of that page will be listening.
Mate, the owner of that page is in year 12 at the moment, Brisbane guy. And if you have a look at some of the content, or put me aside and have a look at what he does for refereeing in general.
Oh, it is amazing.
He's like for a kid that loves footy, that loves refereeing. He's fantastic at what he does. He also referees. I hope his career is long and as well. So he no doubt will be listening.
Absolutely. So shout out to you, mate. And yeah, thank you very much, Matt, for joining me on Life and Sport podcast.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you.